At 6:47 in the morning, on June 6, 1944, Commander Samuel Dealey stood in the cramped conning tower of USS Harder, peering through his periscope at 3 Japanese destroyers cutting through the moonlit waters off Tawi-Tawi. The destroyers were hunting him, Minatsuki, Hayanami, and Tanikaze, each one displacing over 1,200 tons, armed with 5-inch guns and capable of speeds exceeding 35 knots. Harder, submerged, could barely manage 9 knots. The math didn't work in Dealey's favor. In fact, conventional submarine warfare doctrine said he should be running, diving deep, going silent, hoping the destroyers would give up the chase and move on to easier prey. But Samuel Dealey wasn't a conventional submarine commander. At 37 years old, with 5 war patrols and 18 enemy ships already to his credit, he'd earned a reputation for doing exactly what everyone said couldn't be done. In the confined space of Harder's conning tower, every man knew what was coming. They'd seen their captain do this before. Instead of running from the destroyers, Dealey was going to charge straight at them. And in the next 4 days, he would sink 5 Japanese warships in attacks so audacious, so unexpected, that the Imperial Japanese Navy would make decisions that would alter the entire course of the Pacific War. This is the story of how one submarine and one commander shattered every rule of naval warfare, and in doing so, helped win the war in the Pacific. The making of a destroyer killer. Samuel David Dealey came from Dallas, Texas, born on September 13, 1906, into a prominent family. His uncle was George B. Dealey, founder and publisher of the Dallas Morning News. Young Sam grew up with certain expectations: attend good schools, make something of himself, honor the family name. And he did attend the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. But his early performance there was, to put it charitably, underwhelming. Poor grades led to him bilging out, academy slang for flunking out, and walking through the infamous Bilger's Gate in the Naval Academy's stone wall. For most men, that would have been the end of the story. But Dealey fought for reinstatement, won it, and eventually graduated with the class of 1930. That persistence, that refusal to accept defeat, would define his entire naval career. After graduation, Dealey spent time on battleships and destroyers before attending submarine school in New London, Connecticut. His peacetime submarine career was solid but unremarkable. He served on the S-34, S-24, and Nautilus, learning his craft on vessels that represented the older generation of American submarine design. When war broke out after Pearl Harbor, Dealey was commanding the S-20, a non-combat experimental submarine used for testing equipment off the New England coast. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the kind of assignment that made headlines, but it gave him something invaluable: practical experience and a deep understanding of how submarines actually functioned in the water. Not just in theory, but in practice. That knowledge would save his life and the lives of his crew more times than anyone could count. In December 1942, Dealey was given command of a brand-new Gato-class fleet submarine under construction at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. She was designated SS-257, and her name was Harder. Named after a fish of the mullet family found off South Africa, the Harder was 311 feet long, displaced 1,500 tons, and could dive to a test depth of 300 feet. She carried 24 torpedoes and a crew of 80 officers and men. Dealey commissioned her on December 2, 1942, less than a year after Pearl Harbor. After shakedown trials off the East Coast, during which Harder survived a friendly fire incident when a Navy patrol bomber mistook her for an enemy submarine, Dealey brought his boat through the Panama Canal to Pearl Harbor in the spring of 1943. The Pacific War was waiting, and Harder was ready to join the fight. Building a reputation. Harder's first war patrols were successful, but not extraordinary. Dealey and his crew hunted Japanese merchant shipping in the waters around the Caroline Islands, learning the rhythms of combat, figuring out which tactics worked and which ones got you killed. By early 1944, Harder had completed 3 patrols and sunk several cargo ships. But it was on the 4th patrol, in April 1944, that Dealey began to establish the reputation that would make him legendary. The submarine was assigned lifeguard duty, picking up downed American pilots in the waters around Woolley. On April 1st, Harder received orders to rescue an injured Navy pilot who'd been shot down on a small enemy-held island just west of Wolyai. The island was crawling with Japanese soldiers. The pilot, Ensign John Galvin, was hiding on the beach, wounded and exposed to enemy fire. Most submarine commanders would have waited for darkness, or called for air support, or done anything to minimize the risk. Dealey nosed Harder straight toward the beach in broad daylight. He ran the submarine up onto the reef, grinding her bow against the coral to hold position, and stood on the bridge directing the rescue while Japanese snipers fired at him from the shore. Circling American aircraft tried to suppress the sniper fire, but bullets still pinged off Harder's conning tower. Dealey never flinched. A rubber boat went out, retrieved Galvin, and brought him back to the submarine. Then Dealey worked both screws, the propellers, to pull Harder off the reef and back into deeper water. The entire operation took less than 30 minutes. For this action, Dealey received the Navy Cross, his first. But more importantly, his crew saw what kind of commander they had. The kind who would risk everything to save one man. The kind who stayed calm under fire. The kind you'd follow into hell itself, if he asked. 2 weeks later, on April 13th, Dealey did something that no American submarine commander had ever done before. Destroyer Ikazuchi detected Harder and charged at flank speed, intending to ram or depth charge the submarine into oblivion. Every officer on Harder's bridge expected Dealey to run. Instead, he ordered flank speed ahead, straight at the destroyer. At 900 yards, Harder fired 4 torpedoes in a spread pattern. 2 struck Ikazuchi amidships. The destroyer exploded and sank in 5 minutes. Dealey's radio report back to Pearl Harbor became famous throughout the Pacific Submarine Force. Expended 4 torpedoes and 1 destroyer. 4 words that changed everything. Because until that moment, American submarines didn't sink Japanese destroyers. Japanese destroyers sank American submarines. Between December 1941 and March 1944, 14 American submarines had been lost to destroyer attacks. 0 American submarines had sunk a Japanese destroyer in active combat engagement. Dealey had just rewritten the rules. The destroyer problem. To understand why Dealey's success was so revolutionary, you need to understand the relationship between submarines and destroyers. In 1944, Japanese destroyers were purpose-built submarine killers. They were fast, capable of speeds over 35 knots. They were armed with depth charges that could detonate at various depths to bracket a submarine's position. They had sonar systems that could detect submerged submarines from thousands of yards away, and they were designed specifically for anti-submarine warfare. Their entire purpose was to find submarines and destroy them. American submarines, on the other hand, were designed for commerce raiding, sinking merchant ships and cargo vessels. The standard American fleet submarine could make 21 knots on the surface using diesel engines, but submerged, running on electric batteries, the best they could manage was 9 knots, maybe 10 in short bursts. That speed differential was everything. If a destroyer detected you, it could run you down. It could position itself directly over you and drop depth charges until your hull cracked open. The tactical doctrine that had developed by 1944 was simple. If a destroyer detected your submarine, you went deep and went quiet. You rigged for silent running, shutting down all non-essential equipment, moving at minimum speed, hoping the destroyer would lose sonar contact and give up. You didn't fight destroyers. You ran from them, and if you couldn't run, you died. Japanese destroyer captains knew this. They'd been trained on it. They expected American submarines to run. So when destroyer Ikazuchi's captain saw Harder charging straight at him in April 1944, he hesitated. That hesitation cost him 12 seconds. 12 seconds was all the time Dealey needed for his torpedoes to close the range and strike. But Ikazuchi was just the beginning. After returning to Pearl Harbor in late May, Dealey received new orders. Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of the Pacific Submarine Force, had been studying intelligence reports about Japanese destroyer losses. Code breakers had determined that Japan was suffering a critical shortage of destroyers. They'd lost dozens in the Solomon Islands campaign, and they were having increasing difficulty protecting their convoys and screening their fleet operations. Lockwood made a strategic decision. Starting immediately, sinking destroyers would be a higher priority than sinking cargo ships or even tankers, and he knew exactly which submarine commander to send on the most dangerous mission in the Pacific. 4 days in hell. On May 26, 1944, Harder departed Fremantle, Australia, for her 5th war patrol. Dealey had been assigned a patrol area outside the major Japanese fleet anchorage at Tawi-Tawi, off the northeast coast of Borneo. This was the heart of Japanese naval power in the southwest Pacific. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet, the combined fleet's main striking force, was anchored there. 4 battleships, including the legendary Yamato, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, 28 destroyers. It was the largest concentration of Japanese naval power since the Battle of Midway, 2 years earlier, and American code breakers knew they were coming. The Japanese were planning Operation Ago, a decisive battle to destroy the American invasion fleet in the Philippines. Dealey's mission was to patrol the waters around Tawi-Tawi, gather intelligence on Japanese fleet movements, and attack targets of opportunity. In other words, sink whatever he could find. For 9 days, Harder operated undetected in the restricted waters around the anchorage. Then, on June 6th, at 3 in the morning, a Japanese patrol aircraft spotted Harder's periscope wake 15 miles north of Tawi-Tawi. 3 destroyers responded immediately: Minatsuki, Hayanami, and Tanekase. They were coming for blood. Dealey studied the lead destroyer through his periscope. Minatsuki was 1,250 tons, armed with 4 5-inch guns, and she was zigzagging aggressively to avoid torpedo attacks. Behind her, 2 more destroyers spread out in a search pattern, boxing Harder into a kill zone. Any normal submarine commander would have gone deep immediately. But Dealey swung Harder's bow directly at Minatsuki. Range 1,100 yards. Time to collision 96 seconds. Every man in the conning tower knew what down the throat meant. You fired torpedoes straight at an attacking destroyer's bow, then dove beneath her keel. If your torpedoes missed, the destroyer dropped depth charges directly on your position. If you dove too late, the destroyer rammed you. At 750 yards, Dealey fired 3 torpedoes. Take her down 300 feet. Harder's bow dropped at a 30-degree angle. 40 seconds after firing, 2 explosions shook the submarine so violently that light fixtures shattered throughout the boat. Then a 3rd explosion lifted Harder's stern 6 feet before slamming it back down. Men grabbed handholds. Equipment rattled. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Dealey climbed to periscope depth. Where Minatsuki had been, he saw debris and an expanding oil slick. The destroyer had broken in half and was sinking. The other 2 destroyers were racing away, dropping depth charges at random, hoping to get lucky. Admiral Sumu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the combined fleet, received news of the attack at 9 in the morning. He ordered 6 more destroyers to find the submarine. By noon, Japanese patrol planes were searching every 20 minutes. But Dealey wasn't finished hunting. June 7th, 2:30 in the morning, Harder surfaced to recharge her batteries. The night was pitch black, no moon, heavy cloud cover. Perfect conditions for a surface attack. At 3:12, the radar operator picked up a contact. Single ship bearing 095, range 8,000 yards, closing fast. The contact was moving at 28 knots, definitely a destroyer. It was Hayanami 1,700 tons, searching for American submarines since 1 in the morning. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kuboki, had received orders to return to base at 3. He was exhausted. His crew was exhausted. Nobody expected an American submarine to attack on the surface at night. Dealey ordered flank speed. Harder's diesel engines pushed the submarine to 21 knots. He was closing the range deliberately. Get inside the destroyer's radar detection range before they spotted you. At 4,000 yards, Hayanami's radar operator picked up a surface contact. Small, moving fast, probably another destroyer returning to base. At 3,000 yards, Kuboki realized his mistake. American submarine. He ordered flank speed and turned to ram. Too late. At 2,300 yards, Dealey fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Hayanami's starboard side near the aft magazine. The explosion tore the destroyer's stern completely off. The ship rolled 90 degrees, her propellers still spinning as she went under stern first. Kuboki, and 147 sailors died. Dealey submerged immediately. Japanese patrol planes would arrive within minutes. 2 destroyers in 24 hours. The Imperial Japanese Navy was hunting him with everything they had. Admiral Toyota was furious. He pulled 8 destroyers from convoy escort duty and organized them into hunter-killer groups. Their only mission: find and destroy the American submarine operating near Tawi-Tawi. Every destroyer captain received the same orders: maximum aggression, no retreat. Kill that submarine. The strategic earthquake. Besun on June 8th. Dealey took harder south towards Sibutu Passage, the narrow strait between Tawi-Tawi and Borneo. Japanese destroyers patrolled that passage constantly, and Dealey wanted to see how many he could sink before they figured out his tactics. At 2 in the afternoon, lookouts spotted 2 destroyers steaming in formation, Tanakaze and an unidentified escort. Both were conducting a standard search pattern, changing course every 8 minutes. Dealey studied their movements for 90 minutes, timing the pattern. At 4:30, Tanakaze turned toward Harder's position. Dealey let her close. 2,500 yards, 2,000, 1,500. At 1,200 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes at 17-second intervals. The first torpedo missed. The second struck Tanakaze near the bridge. The third hit the forward magazine. The explosion was so massive that Harder's crew heard it clearly underwater, even with the hatches sealed. Tanakaze's bow section separated from the main hull. Both pieces sank within 3 minutes. The escort destroyer immediately turned and charged Harder's position, dropping depth charges as she came. Dealey took Harder deep, 400 feet. The depth charges exploded overhead, shaking the submarine violently, but causing no serious damage. After 40 minutes, the destroyer gave up and withdrew. 3 destroyers in 3 days. What Dealey didn't know, what he couldn't know, was the panic he was causing in Japanese naval headquarters. Admiral Toyota and Admiral Osawa, commander of the mobile fleet at Tawi-Tawi, were looking at the reports and doing the math. 1 American submarine had penetrated their defensive screen. 1 submarine had sunk 3 destroyers in 3 days. If an American submarine could operate this easily around Tawi-Tawi, the entire anchorage was vulnerable. The mobile fleet, the most powerful naval force Japan had left, was sitting in a death trap. Ozawa sent an urgent message to Toyota. The mobile fleet needed to depart Tawi-Tawi immediately. The Americans knew where they were. Staying was suicide. But here's where the strategic impact becomes clear. Operation Ago, the Japanese plan to destroy the American invasion force near the Philippines, wasn't scheduled to begin until June 15th. That was a full 6 days away. Moving early meant Ozawa's carriers would arrive at the Philippine Sea without proper reconnaissance. His destroyers would be scattered across multiple patrol zones instead of organized into protective screens. His supply lines wouldn't be established. His battle plan would be disrupted. But staying at Tawi-Tawi with an American submarine hunting his destroyers meant losing ships every day. Toyota agreed with Ozawa's assessment. On June 10th at 8 in the morning, the Japanese mobile fleet departed Tawi-Tawi. 4 battleships, 9 carriers, 15 cruisers, 24 destroyers, heading northeast toward the Philippine Sea. American codebreakers intercepted the movement orders within hours. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the 5th Fleet, adjusted his battle plans accordingly. The early departure gave American carriers an extra day to position themselves for what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the decisive carrier battle that would destroy Japanese naval aviation forever. But on June 9th, Dealey didn't know any of this. He only knew there were still Japanese destroyers to sink. At 5 in the morning, he took Harder to periscope depth 12 miles southwest of Tawi-Tawi. What he saw made every man in the conning tower hold their breath. Dead ahead, 4 Japanese destroyers steaming in line abreast formation, actively searching for submarines. Their sonar was pinging so loudly that Harder's sound operator could hear it without headphones. Dealey had 8 torpedoes remaining. 4 destroyers meant he'd get maybe 2 shots before they overwhelmed him. He studied their formation through the periscope. The lead destroyer was zigzagging aggressively. The second was maintaining a steady course. That was his target. At 6:12, the second destroyer turned directly toward Harder's position. Dealey waited. 3,000 yards, 2,500. At 1,800 yards, he fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 struck the destroyer's port side within 5 seconds of each other. The ship exploded so violently that debris flew 300 feet into the air. She rolled over and sank in 90 seconds. The other 3 destroyers immediately converged on Harder's position. Dealey took her deep, 500 feet. Depth charges began exploding overhead. 23 in the first 10 minutes. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in. Hull plates groaned under the pressure. A pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, spraying seawater across the deck. Harder's crew worked in silence, repairing damage while depth charges continued to detonate around them. After 2 hours, the destroyers withdrew. Dealey climbed to periscope depth. The destroyers were gone. 4 enemy warships sunk in 4 days, 5 if you counted the damaged destroyer from earlier. But Dealey wasn't thinking about his success. He was thinking about his fuel. Harder had burned through 60% of her diesel reserves. She had maybe 3 more days before she'd have to withdraw to Fremantle. The battle that changed everything. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, 9 days after Harder sank her 4th destroyer off Tawi-Tawi. It was the largest carrier battle in history. 15 American carriers faced 9 Japanese carriers, 900 American aircraft against 430 Japanese aircraft. The battle lasted 2 days, and it was a massacre. American pilots shot down 376 Japanese aircraft, while losing only 30 of their own. American pilots called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 Japanese carriers sank: Taiho, Shokaku, and Hio. 2 battleships were damaged. 1 cruiser sunk. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost 75% of its carrier air groups and would never recover. But the battle might have gone very differently if Admiral Ozawa had arrived on schedule. His original plan called for the mobile fleet to depart Tawi-Tawi on June 15th. That would have given his reconnaissance planes 4 days to locate the American fleet before the battle began. His carriers would have been fully supplied. His destroyer screens would have been properly organized. His battle plan would have been coordinated with land-based aircraft from the Philippines. Instead, Harder forced him to leave 6 days early. Ozawa arrived in the Philippine Sea on June 14th with his fleet scattered across 200 miles of ocean. His reconnaissance aircraft had burned through their fuel reserves during the early departure and couldn't conduct proper searches. His destroyers were still regrouping from anti-submarine patrols around Tawi-Tawi. His supply ships were 3 days behind schedule. When American carrier aircraft found Ozawa's fleet on June 19th, his carriers were still launching aircraft. His combat air patrol was undermanned. His fleet formation was disorganized. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot happened because Ozawa wasn't ready. And Ozawa wasn't ready because Dealey had sunk 4 destroyers in 4 days and convinced the Japanese that Tawi-Tawi was too dangerous. Admiral Lockwood understood this immediately. In his post-war memoir, he wrote that Harder's 5th Patrol was the most strategically important submarine operation of the Pacific War. 4 destroyers sunk meant 4 fewer escorts protecting Japanese carriers, but forcing the mobile fleet to depart early meant the entire Japanese battle plan collapsed before the first shot was fired. That's the real legacy of those 4 days in June. Not just the ships Dealey sank, but the battle he helped the United States win by making the Japanese react before they were ready. The Final Hunt. After returning to Fremantle on June 26th, Dealey and his crew spent July undergoing repairs and taking on supplies. Admiral Lockwood awarded Dealey the Navy Cross on the spot, his 4th. Then he asked the question every submarine commander dreaded. "Can you do it again?" Dealey's answer was immediate. "Give me torpedoes and I'll sink 10. Lockwood wanted to give Dealey a rest, a command on shore, a chance to train other submarine commanders in the tactics that had made Harder so successful. But Dealey had a problem. More than a third of his crew were new replacements. He felt strongly that he should break in the new crew before turning Harder over to a new commanding officer. Lockwood reluctantly agreed to 1 more patrol. Just 1. On August 5, 1944, Harder departed Fremantle for her 6th war patrol. She'd been assigned to operate as part of a 3-submarine wolf pack with USS Hado and USS Hake. Dealey was in command of the Wolfpack. Their mission: patrol the waters west of Luzon and attack Japanese shipping heading to the Philippines. The patrol started well. On August 21st, the Wolfpack intercepted a 16-ship convoy off Palawan Bay. In a coordinated attack, they sank 4 cargo ships totaling 22,000 tons. On August 22nd, Harder and Hado attacked 3 coastal defense vessels off Bataan. All 3 sank. Harder was credited with destroying 2 frigates, Matsuwa and Hiburi. By August 23rd, Hado had expended all her torpedoes and withdrew from the patrol. That left Harder and Hake operating together off Dasol Bay on the western coast of Luzon. Japanese intelligence had tracked the Wolfpack's movements. They knew approximately where the American submarines were operating, and they'd sent something special to deal with them. At 4:53 in the morning on August 24th, USS Hake submerged 4 miles off Hermana Island. Through her periscope, she could see Harder on the surface 4,500 yards to the south. Both submarines were preparing to attack a damaged Japanese destroyer that Hado had torpedoed the previous day. Then Hake's sonar operator heard something that made his blood run cold. Echo ranging. Close. Getting closer. 2 Japanese escort ships were closing on Harder's position, CD-22 and Minesweeper, PB-102. Both were moving at 18 knots, conducting an active sonar search. They'd been hunting American submarines for 3 days. Japanese intelligence had intercepted radio transmissions between Harder, Hake, and Hado during the Palawan Bay attack. They knew the Wolfpack was operating somewhere off Dasol Bay. Hake's captain immediately ordered his submarine deep and silent. He watched through his periscope as the 2 Japanese ships closed on Harder. At 5:20, Hake's radio operator tried to warn Harder. No response. Either Harder's radio was off or she was already preparing to dive. At 5:30, Harder crash dived. The Japanese ships were less than 2,000 yards away. Dealey had seen them at the last possible moment. He took Harder down fast, ordering flank speed and maximum dive angle. The submarine descended at 35 degrees, her diesel engine still running as she submerged, leaving a massive bubble trail on the surface that pinpointed her exact location. CD-22's sonar operator had a perfect contact. Range 1,200 yards, depth approximately 200 feet, still diving. At 5:47, CD-22 made her first pass over Harder's position and dropped a full pattern of depth charges set to detonate at 250 feet. The explosions bracketed Harder perfectly. At least 3 detonated within 50 feet of her hull. The submarine's pressure hull cracked near the after torpedo room. Seawater flooded in at tremendous pressure. Harder's stern flooded completely within 90 seconds. The submarine's bow rose sharply as the stern dragged her down. Dealey ordered all ballast blown. Emergency surface. The compressed air system fought against the flooding, but there was too much water in the stern compartments. Harder couldn't reach the surface. At 5:52, CD-22 made a second depth charge run. This pattern hit even closer. The explosions ruptured Harder's main pressure hull in multiple locations. The control room flooded. All electrical power failed. Emergency lighting went dark. At 600 feet, well below her maximum operating depth, Harder's hull began to implode. Bulkheads collapsed under pressure, compartments crushed like tin cans. The submarine was gone in less than 3 minutes from the first depth charge impact. At 6 o'clock, CD-22 and PB-102 reported a successful kill. Large quantities of oil, wood debris, and cork floated to the surface. They circled the area for 2 hours, dropping additional depth charges to ensure the submarine was destroyed. They recovered no survivors. All 79 men aboard Harder died. Commander Samuel Dealey, radioman Calvin Bull, who'd earned a Bronze Star for the destroyer kills in June. Every officer and sailor who'd helped make Harder the most feared submarine in the Pacific. USS Hake remained submerged until nightfall. Her captain filed a contact report describing Harder's loss. The message reached Admiral Lockwood at 8 in the morning on August 25th, beneath the waves. For 80 years, Harder's exact location remained a mystery. The Navy knew she'd been lost off Dasol Bay, but the South China Sea is vast and deep, and finding a submarine wreck without precise coordinates is like searching for a needle in an ocean. Then, on May 22, 2024, an underwater exploration team led by Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 project discovered Harder's wreck in the South China Sea. She sits upright on the seafloor at a depth of more than 3,000 feet, 12 miles west of Dassel Bay, where she made her last dive. Her pressure hull remains mostly intact, except for depth charge damage aft of the conning tower, the fatal wounds that killed her and everyone aboard. The Lost 52 project uses autonomous underwater vehicles and advanced sonar to locate the 52 American submarines lost during World War II. Taylor's team had been searching for Harder for years, aided by recent favorable weather conditions and improved technology. When they finally located the wreck, they used 4D photogrammetry to create a detailed model of the site, scanning the entire boat and stitching all the images together. The Naval History and Heritage Command confirmed the identity using data collected by the Lost 52 project. Despite submarines being notoriously difficult to identify underwater, the excellent state of preservation and the quality of the data made confirmation possible. The wreck is now a protected war grave. No salvage operations are permitted. It's the final resting place of 79 men who gave their lives in defense of their nation. But finding Harder meant something more than locating a shipwreck. It meant bringing closure to families who'd waited 80 years for answers. It meant honoring 79 men who changed naval warfare forever. Tim Taylor received the Navy's Distinguished Public Service Award in 2021 for his work locating World War II submarines. Admiral Samuel Cox, director of the Naval History and Heritage Command, said at the announcement of Harder's discovery, "Harder was lost in the course of victory. We must not forget that victory has a price, as does freedom. We are grateful that Lost 52 has given us the opportunity to once again honor the valor of the crew of the Hitam Harder submarine that sank the most Japanese warships, in particularly audacious attacks, under her legendary skipper, Commander Sam Deely." The Revolution in Naval Warfare. Between December 1941 and August 1944, American submarines sank 1,314 enemy ships, totaling 5.3 million tons. Japanese merchant vessels, cargo ships, tankers, troop transports, but only 29 warships. Most submarine captains avoided warships. Too dangerous, too well armed, too fast. Deely proved that submarines could hunt warships successfully. His down-the-throat tactic worked because it violated every assumption Japanese destroyer captains made about submarine behavior. Submarines weren't supposed to charge destroyers. They were supposed to run. When Harder charged, Japanese captains hesitated. That hesitation cost them 12 seconds. 12 seconds was enough time for torpedoes to close the range and strike. By war's end, American submarines using Deely's tactics had sunk 214 Japanese warships, 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, 38 destroyers. The rest were submarines, escorts, and patrol craft. Japan started the war with 63 destroyers. They built 49 more during the war. American submarines sank 38 of them. Harder accounted for 5 in just 4 days. The Tactical Revolution. Deely started changed submarine doctrine throughout the Pacific Fleet. Before Harder's 5th patrol, submarine doctrine emphasized stealth and evasion. If a destroyer detected you, you ran. You went deep, rigged for silent running, and hoped the depth charges missed. Engaging destroyers in direct combat was considered suicide. The math didn't work. Destroyers were faster, better armed, and designed specifically to kill submarines. Deely changed that math by understanding one critical fact about destroyer captains. They expected submarines to run. When a submarine charged instead, the destroyer captain had to make an instant decision with incomplete information. Turn left, turn right, maintain course, fire guns, all while torpedoes closed the range at 46 knots. Most captains chose wrong. By the time they realized their mistake, the torpedoes were already hitting. Between June and December 1944, 12 American submarines adopted Deely's aggressive tactics. USS Tang sank 2 destroyers. USS Trigger sank 1. USS Barb sank 1 destroyer and damaged another. USS Flasher sank 3 escort vessels using down-the-throat attacks. The tactic's success rate was 63%. For every 5 attacks, submarines sank 3 destroyers and damaged 1 more. Only 1 in 5 attacks failed completely. Japanese destroyer captains eventually adapted. By late 1944, they developed counter tactics. When a submarine charged, destroyers would turn away and circle back, forcing the submarine to expose her broadside to torpedo attacks from other destroyers in the formation. Or they'd slow down deliberately, letting the torpedoes pass ahead while closing for a ram. The tactic still worked, but the success rate dropped to 40%. American submarine losses increased. Between August and December 1944, 9 submarines were lost to destroyer attacks. Tang sank on October 24th, when her own torpedo circled back and hit her. Harder went down on August 24th, but even with higher losses, submarines were sinking more enemy ships than ever before. The aggressive tactics worked. Admiral Lockwood faced a difficult choice: recall all submarines and return to defensive tactics, or accept higher losses in exchange for destroying Japan's convoy system completely. He chose aggression. Between January and August 1945, American submarines operating under aggressive patrol doctrines sank 437 Japanese merchant ships and 53 warships. By August, Japan had less than 25% of the merchant tonnage it started the war with. The home islands were starving. Factories were shut down for lack of raw materials. The Imperial Japanese Navy couldn't fuel its remaining ships. Dealey never saw any of this. He died 3 months after his greatest victory, killed by the same type of escort ship he'd spent a year learning to destroy. But his tactics continued. Every submarine commander in the Pacific studied Harder's patrol reports. Every attack plan referenced the down-the-throat doctrine. Every torpedo solution included calculations for charging destroyers. Remembering the brave. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented Commander Samuel Dealey's Medal of Honor to his widow, Edwina Dealey, in a ceremony on the White House lawn. The citation read in part, "This remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers, sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks, attests to the valiant fighting spirit of Commander Dealey and his indomitable command." The Navy named a destroyer escort after him, USS Dealey, commissioned in 1954. She served until 1972. Harder herself received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 5 war patrols and 6 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Hit 'em harder," became legendary throughout the submarine force. Commander Dealey's grave is at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 59, grave 874. His headstone lists his rank, his dates of service, and one line, Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer. Families of Harder's crew visit every year on August 24th, the anniversary of her sinking. They place flowers. They share stories about grandfathers and great-uncles who died at 22 or 25 or 37, fighting a war most of them never expected to survive. The 79 men aboard Harder came from 38 states, farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Michigan, college graduates from California. They volunteered for submarine duty knowing the casualty rates. 22% of submariners who served in World War II died, the highest percentage of any branch of the American military. They knew the odds. They served anyway. Today, Harder's story lives on in unexpected ways. At the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, submarine tactics instructors still teach the down-the-throat attack as a case study in aggressive warfare. Not because modern submarines use the same tactic. Modern torpedoes are wire-guided and don't require close-range attacks, but because Dealey's approach demonstrates a fundamental principle. When your enemy expects you to run, charging often works better than hiding. The Naval History and Heritage Command maintains Harder's complete patrol reports in their archives. Every radio message, every torpedo firing solution, every depth charge attack. Researchers studying submarine warfare in the Pacific can trace exactly how Dealey developed his tactics across 6 war patrols. His reports show a commander who learned from every encounter, refined his approach constantly, and never stopped looking for ways to sink more enemy ships. The last survivor of Harder's crew, Paul Bryce, died in 2022 at age 98. With his death, no one who served aboard Harder remains alive to tell their story firsthand. That's why stories like this matter. These men left behind patrol reports and radio messages and Medal of Honor citations, but those documents can't convey what it felt like to charge a destroyer at flank speed, or hear depth charges exploding overhead, or watch your captain make decisions that meant life or death for everyone aboard. The official history tells us Harder sank 5 destroyers in 4 days. It doesn't tell us about the fear, the exhaustion, the absolute certainty that this patrol might be your last. But we can honor their memory by making sure their story isn't forgotten. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about submarine commanders who changed naval warfare with aggressive tactics. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Commander Samuel Dealey and the 79 men of USS Harder don't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered.